Welcome to Season 3 of The Lifestyle Chase, and I'm your host, Chris Little. This podcast features high performers who have found a way to live their best life while balancing their health, wellness, friends, and family. To help this podcast grow, please share it on social media, rate 5 stars, tell your friends, and check out the past 140 episodes and counting. You can follow me on Instagram at Christian Little and at The Lifestyle Chase. Thanks for listening. Let's get started. All right, so welcome to The Lifestyle Chase. I am joined by the one and only Kayle Simpson, and this is episode 169. How are you doing today? What is life like? Tell me a cool story from your day.
Oh, well, I kind of told you. I slept in today. So it's been a bit of a rush. Let's see. Cool story. I went to the gym. Something interesting must have happened. I'm not sure. And I saw a guy riding a motorbike with like 4 gallons, like those big water gallons of water. So it's always kind of an adventure to see what you find on a motorbike on the streets. Like I've seen like maybe 5 people at one point, or like 4, a family on like, you know, a little two-seater motorbike. So that was kind of cool.
Well,
you know, just a box of chickens, like a bunch of crates.
I mean, that is crazy. I can't imagine seeing that here in Alberta. And just to give the audience to get them up to speed kind of thing, like they can go back in the episodes, they can listen to you when you were on the show and you're in Australia. But what's happened since you've left Australia? Like what has happened in your life? Kind of give us the update as if we're just like catching up and filling in the gaps kind of thing.
Yeah, well, a lot happened even while I was in Australia, since the last time that we talked on the podcast. I decided that it would be a good idea to rent a motorhome and travel around the country, like halfway kind of around Australia on my own while working. And I can't remember how many miles I drove or how many kilometers. Maybe 4. It's either like, I think it might have been 14,000, but I could be wrong. Is that ridiculous sounding?
No, that sounds reasonable. Like you'd be driving a lot, but it's realistic.
Yeah. So I did that, and then decided to come to Bali, which was my kind of pre-COVID plans. And I've been here for the last few months. And yeah, that's kind of the general recap. So a lot of like lessons learned, self-discovery has happened since then. I feel like last time we talked on the podcast, I was in, you know, it was kind of at the height of the pandemic, if I can remember correctly. And
it was cool because like I was listening to it today and it was like end of April of last year. And I was like, what a full circle moment. Like we had no idea what COVID would really be. Like I think both of us were kind of like, it's not so bad. And then it kind of got a little bit worse. Like obviously Australia kind of got things settling down a lot sooner, but just kind of cool to see the perspective. And honestly, like just from following your adventures and stuff, from my point of view, just the whole van thing, that was interesting. Just like kind of the lessons that you learned by traveling in the van, the crazy events that happened, just being in that different environment and stuff. And I was wondering, like, what were some of the takeaways that you got from that? Like, what kind of inspired you to do the whole van thing in the first place? And if somebody else was saying that they wanted to do that, what would you tell them?
What inspired? I don't even really know what inspired me to do it. I think I just saw the idea somewhere and then I got it in my head and then I just couldn't get it out of my head and I kind of figured, why not? And what was your other question? So what inspired me to do it, and then what were my biggest takeaways
Well,
from it?
takeaways, and then even if just like, let's say somebody's just got cabin fever from all of this whole like staying at home thing, and then one day they get set loose and they get to go to wherever they want to go, and they think, I'm going to go in a van. Like, what would you tell somebody like that?
Yeah, I would say definitely try it out for a short period of time first. Like 3 months isn't that long, but I think when I first started, I kind of had it in my head that I was like, oh, this is awesome. Like, I'm going to do this, for years. I'm going to buy a van in Europe and I'm going to do it there. And I had just kind of gotten a little bit ahead of myself. And then after about a month in it, I was like, yeah, this isn't really for me. It doesn't really make sense. But I think so it was awesome. And I think if you're someone who, there's a lot of challenges that come with it, like you might imagine, and there's more that you don't think of that come up. And a lot of it is just, the things that you do every day that you take for granted, like showering and brushing your teeth and having a fridge and cooking, like they just become exponentially harder, which for me, I tried to, I knew that going in, and I was like, I feel like, challenges make us stronger, and I think it'll help me grow as a person. But then I kind of realized, I could maybe challenge myself in other areas of my life that might be more useful to other people. So it was a good experience for me, but my biggest takeaway was it helped me kind of like solidify my values and what's important to me and how I do want to live, and how routine is very important to me and what I'm passionate about. Like I found it was a struggle to balance everything. Like I was working full time in my laptop, and then, just activities of daily living were just taking up so much more time. And then I was also spending a few hours every day driving, and I was trying to sightsee. Like I had just way overfilled my plate, and it was more challenging. Like I couldn't spend as much time on self-care as I typically do, which is really important to me. So it really solidified how important that is to me, and how important like my mental health is. And yeah, I was like, traveling's cool and everything, but if you're like strung out and stressed out and like not taking care of your body and your mind, it's just like, even if you're in the most beautiful place, like it's not, your experience of life is just more dull. So it really solidified for me, like fitness, self-care, taking care of your mind and body, like that has to come first, because otherwise anything that you do outside of that, like, is just not going to be as fulfilling, and you're not going to be as present, and you're not going to show up as the best version of yourself. So that's like, I would say my biggest lesson that I've learned since then, and that I've really taken and applied to my life in Bali now.
So in just all that reflection, because like sometimes we don't know kind of like what's going on with ourselves, like we're kind of going through the motions, we're putting the van in drive, we're going from place to place, and it's like hard to realize like how far behind we fall until like something happens. So for you, what would you say was it that happened that like really alerted you that you needed change, kind of thing?
I think it was like I spent so much time alone, which was another like awesome thing about the van. And I don't want to sway someone one side or the other. I would say try it out and think about the reasons that you're doing it. But there were like a lot of awesome things that came with it. And one of them was I got to spend a lot of time alone with my thoughts. So I just had a lot of self-reflection time, and a lot of that I would spend listening to podcasts and audiobooks and like exploring different thoughts and different ideas. But I think just all of the self-reflection time, like I typically, before I did the van thing in Australia, I had a pretty solid, consistent meditation routine, which really helps me to get in touch with myself and my thoughts and be more self-aware. But that was one thing that I just didn't really have time for in the van. However, I had so much time alone, and like I would kind of just try to bring that mindfulness while I was driving and like observe my thoughts. Which was another thing that forced me to kind of, okay, how do I just be more mindful in my everyday life, which is actually the point of meditation. It's not to just like not have any thoughts and like chillax and like be good at meditating. Like the point is to get better at observing your thought processes and your emotions and creating space between that so that you can create more self-awareness. So I think, yeah, meditation was, I think, what really helped me with that. And then just transferring that to being more aware of my thoughts and emotions throughout my everyday life.
Sweet.
That being said, I think it's really easy for that gap to close and to just completely forget and to become reactive. So meditation, I think, it's like practice. And it is good to have a consistent practice. But the point of the practice is to like remind yourself of what that's like to observe your thoughts, and then try as much as possible to bring that into your everyday life, because it's 15 minutes out of 24. So the 23 hours or however long you meditate, but it's going to be the majority of your day you're going to spend not meditating, and that's what's going to make the biggest impact.
So amidst all of the travel and self-reflection and time on your own, were there any instances where you were kind of taken aback by like how impactful the actions of strangers can be, whether it be in a positive way or a negative way? Like, is there anything that kind of pops into your head when you think about that?
The impact of strangers? I'm thinking, I feel like because I was alone so much and, when you're traveling around and I had no one with me, just how like every interaction with someone can be a chance to connect. And I feel like I may have even said this on our last podcast, potentially.
There's a chance.
But especially with COVID and people being so socially isolated, I just really was grateful for the opportunities to interact with humans face to face. And I just want to have a disclaimer, like I have basically with my travels and just where I've happened to be in the world have pretty much like bypassed, like I did like 4 weeks of quarantine, I think in total, or like heavy restrictions. And aside from that, just the way that Australia closed their borders, like things have been pretty normal for me. So I have pretty much like bypassed a lot of the stuff that I know everyone's been dealing with. So yeah, I've been very grateful for interactions with strangers and just remembering that like every human that you talk to, they're, whether it's a server or like someone you walk past on the street or someone who cleans your house or like is taking away your garbage, like they're all human beings with a story, and like you're no better than anyone. And just those small interactions have the potential to make your day and make their day. And to just like take advantage of that and like try not to get lost in your own bubble and just like get into your routines and your habits, and forget that, I don't know, those opportunities to connect and to like see someone as a human being and just be kind.
Definitely. I mean, like, it was kind of cool to watch just for contrast of how you would kind of navigate like the month to month to month, where like some of the listeners will be out of the US, some of them will be out of the Edmonton area. Everybody's kind of had a different year and how it's gone. But I would notice like you would be traveling in the van and then something would go wrong, and then it would just be, whether it be the neighborhood you were in or like something that the company set you up with. It was like, even when things completely go wrong, like having that faith that you can focus on the positive, or you can kind of take care of like your attitude towards things. I thought that was really, I don't know, like it kind of gave me perspective. Like for me to watch through social media and stuff, like as disconnected as that can be, it's also like helpful for people to be able to see, okay, like this is somebody across the world in the same industry with different obstacles, but similar context, in the sense that not everything's in our control. Like not everything that we face is going to be something that we know what to do with. But despite that, we can take like a solid approach towards that thing, We can take care of our mind and body. We can be kind and kind of like ask the right questions when it comes to coming to a resolution. Like, I'd imagine there's a lot of tough conversations that you had to have in every like place that you've lived, in every vehicle that you had to drive, or like person that had to escort you places. Like, have you been like riding on the back of like scooters and bikes and stuff when you've been in Bali? Like, what kinds of modes of transportation have you been on in the last like year?
Well, I was in the same motorhome for the 3 months that I was traveling in it. But then since coming here, I was doing like bike taxi. Like, people ride scooters in Bali. It's really hard to get around on a car. Just the roads are really narrow, and the traffic. So, but I had never driven a motorcycle before. So for my first month here, I was riding on the back of like bike taxis. Just to kind of get used to it and get a feel for the traffic. And then I had a friend kind of teach me how, and then I've had my own scooter for a couple months now. It's so fun.
Well, it's kind of one of those things that's exciting and exotic at first, but I'm sure as you get used to it, it's like, okay, well, this is how we go to the grocery store now, like, or this is how we go to the gym,
Yeah,
kind of thing.
a little bit, but I'm still like so grateful and having so much fun on it, especially when you go on like longer trips.
That's awesome.
And like you get to be right out there with like the scenery and everything. That's cool.
So, like in the weeks leading up to the move to Bali, what was that like? Were there any uncertainties, or you would, because we talked about it in the previous podcast, if that was your intention the whole time, and it was just kind of like waiting until the right time to go. So, when you were kind of getting to crunch time and you're like, okay, we're going to change locations, like, what were the 3 weeks leading up to that like? Like, was it smooth sailing? Were there any hiccups? Tell me a bit about that whole experience.
Yeah. So my original plan when I was in the van and kind of trying to decide what I was going to do next, I was actually going to go to Thailand because I had heard that they had opened up this new long-term stay visa, and heard about this island, Koh Phangan. I don't know if I'm saying that right. That was kind of similar to Bali. So that was the plan. And then I decided that I did not want to do the hotel quarantine. It's like a mandatory 14-day quarantine, and it was expensive, and I was just over it. I was like, you know what, I'll just wait. And I was going to stay in Australia for a little bit longer and set myself up in the Gold Coast, which is where I ended my van travels. So that was the original plan. And then I heard from kind of a friend of mine that she had gone back to Bali. So I asked how she got there, and then I learned about a visa that you could get here, kind of a same thing, similar deal to Thailand. But at that point, they didn't have a quarantine, and I was like, well, Australia has fewer COVID cases than Bali, so I feel fine with that. And yeah, that's kind of how that happened. It was a pretty quick turnaround decision. I think maybe two or 3 weeks after I decided that, I got on a plane, and that was a little bit chaotic because I had forgotten to get a COVID test, and then locked my luggage inside of the hotel, and no staff was there right as I was trying to go to the airport, and then my luggage got lost, and there were just a lot of things going wrong. But something you were mentioning earlier that was kind of like all these things are going wrong, and you kind of have control or choice over your thoughts. That's been like another big lesson for me, because it's like that's another thing it's all about, like observing your thoughts and being self-aware, is then you get to choose your thoughts. So I think first thing is always like, you don't want to like just spiritual bypass or like toxic positivity, be like, oh, everything's fine, like I'm grateful to be alive, people have it worse. Like, you still have to kind of acknowledge how you're actually feeling and be honest with yourself. Otherwise, you're not actually processing it. You're just kind of bypassing it and like stuffing it down. But like, observe your thoughts and then question them. Ask yourself, okay, like, how does this thought make me feel? What is this thought like serving me? Is this thought even true? What's a different thought that I might choose? And kind of that might make me feel more positive or be more helpful to the situation. And do I want to choose that thought or that belief? So some of the beliefs that I try to choose for myself are like, okay, everything, how is everything happening for me? Or just asking better questions. I think that's another thing that you said. Um, how might this be actually working in my favor? How might, like, what, what can I do about this situation? What is this teaching me? Kind of those types of thoughts. So it's really helped me to embrace the chaos and the uncertainty and all the things going wrong. Yeah.
Well, I mean, once you landed in Bali, what were the things that scared you the most about being in a new environment and kind of having that uncertainty and et cetera, et cetera?
I definitely felt a little bit paranoid because I don't know, I was kind of worried that like everyone was trying to scam me, and I felt anxious about not knowing the language, and it was just such an unfamiliar environment that I kind of felt like for the first couple weeks, if not a little bit longer, it's like I was just very tense all the time and very like standoffish. A little bit opposite of that, you know, treat everyone like a human, like still tried to do that, but at the same time that was like preventing me because I was like just worried for my own safety, and it was tough to get past that because everything was so unfamiliar. I'd never been to Asia before, even though people say Bali is kind of like Southeast Asia light. That's what a friend said to me. It's you know, especially where the neighborhood that I'm in, Canggu, it's kind of more designed for expats. It's not like super touristy, but there's lots of expats living here, and you know, it's not like in the middle of the jungle. But that was challenging, and it took me some time to get comfortable and to kind of ground myself. I had just gone like after the van and all the challenges in Australia. I was in such a good place mentally, and I felt like my mindset was just so solid. And then coming to Bali definitely shook me. But I'm really feeling, you know, any challenge that you go through, it teaches you and it makes you stronger. And I feel like I'm at that place again, which feels really good.
That's good. What would you say kind of dialed it in the most? Was it just kind of like being active and eating healthy, sleeping? What kind of helped you the most?
Yeah, that was definitely something I decided to do. Like that was another thing when I came to Bali. It was, it's a very like social scene here, and you know, coming from, I was isolated, even though COVID wasn't like super a thing in Australia. I was still traveling alone by myself for a long time. So it was nice to come here and meet people and have friends again and be able to connect. But I was drinking more than usual. I was neglecting my morning routine. And then I just kind of had this, I noticed that like my mindset and my self-confidence was just not in the best place. And I was kind of like, okay, I need to make some changes. So definitely eating better. Eating out is so cheap and easy to do in Bali, but I was like, I need a better just plan and being more consistent with exercise and moving my body more. I stopped drinking for the last couple months. I was like, you know what, alcohol is just does not contribute, does not make me a better person, and it does not make me happier. So I stopped that. And then I also have kind of gone through my own like mental health journey. So kind of discovered that I have ADHD and got a diagnosis and have been treating that. And that's also really helped me have compassion for myself. And because it's just another way of understanding myself, but also like, okay, these things that I thought my entire life were like personal flaws, I now have a reason for it, and I feel more equipped to deal with them because I have a support system and I have doctors and even like medicine that I've been taking that has helped me with that and just like feel really empowered. And yeah, I think like understanding myself has really helped with that a lot, and like stepping into that, and yeah, just like self-acceptance.
Well, I mean, when I saw that you were confirmed to have ADHD, like I was thinking that through and I was, oh man, like that would just be a game changer. Just like the amount of, I guess, like clarity it would give you on like past experiences and yeah, just giving yourself more grace. Like, I don't know about you, but I'm a horrible like cleaner. Like I'm not very tidy. And so like when you were talking about that, I was like, ugh. I don't know if I'm just messy or maybe there's something special, but it's just like, what was it that led up to that for you that made you think, okay, like I need to dive a bit deeper. I need to kind of like figure out what is going on with like my thoughts or my efficiencies or just how focused I can be. Like what exactly happened that kind of opened that door for you?
Everyone's brains are different. So whether you have like a condition that can be diagnosed or not, really just like owning that your strengths and your weaknesses and being like, you have strengths that other people don't have, and weaknesses. And often like your biggest strengths are your biggest weaknesses. Like maybe you're messy because you're focused on things that are really important and purposeful for you. And, you know, the minutiae, you just don't stress it. So I think that the self-acceptance thing that can come with just, you know, it doesn't have to be an actual diagnosis. That's what I've learned. But with the kind of how did I get into wanting to explore this, it started with a comment that one of my best friends and my previous roommate in Canada, she was recently diagnosed with ADHD. And I didn't really think anything of it until she said, I think I had made a comment about how I always used to get the hiccups. And she said something like, oh, that's like an ADHD or an anxiety tic. And I was like, oh, I don't have those things. And then she was like, you may or may not just show symptoms of ADHD. And initially I was like offended. And then I started looking into it more, kind of went down a rabbit hole, and I was like, holy bleep, this is me. And yeah, it just explained a lot of my childhood. And originally it's been a roller coaster ever since. Like I made that discovery and was like, okay, yeah, 95% chance I have ADHD. But that was, yeah, maybe 2 months ago or a little bit longer. And I kind of put it on the back burner because I didn't really feel like there was anything that I could do about it. Because I had heard things about people were like, don't go on medication, like just medicate or just meditate, just take care of yourself. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm already doing all those things. Like literally, I'm so on top of them. And I still do it still just interferes with my life in like major ways that are very frustrating. But I was not open to medication because I had heard kind of horror stories from people. And yeah, and then I was doing this experiment where I gave up caffeine because I just wanted to see what my body would be like without having like a caffeine dependence. And there were some good aspects to it as well, but in general, I was just kind of struggling with like getting things done and just having motivation to do like most things. So my nervous system was good, and I was sleeping a little bit better and these things. And then I had a coffee one day and remembered what it felt like to be caffeinated. And that kind of made me I was like, okay, you know what? I'm a better person. Like I am more motivated to do things. I feel like I can, you know, just contribute to society better, and my mood is better. And I was just so much better on caffeine, which kind of made me realize, okay, you know, maybe drugs aren't all bad, and I should look more into if medication is something that I could like add into my treatment plan. And decided to be open to it, but also just like get treatment in general and kind of see a professional. Largely because it's like a lot of things I didn't realize were ADHD, but just like low motivation in general. Like my business is, you know, it's my baby, and it brings me so much passion and fulfillment, but just my motivation some days, it was just so hard to sit down and do things. I think that's like the best way that I can describe how ADHD feels, is like doing things is just so hard. That like, you know, that kind of threshold for motivation that you need to do things simple as even like cleaning up after yourself and like going to bed and leaving the house on time. It's just like so high. So caffeine helped to lower that a bit for me because it raises your dopamine. It's kind of like a weak version of the stimulants, but it also kind of made me a little bit more scatterbrained. But yeah, I think that answers your question. I realize not all drugs are bad. Maybe there is. I should explore this, and like did more research into different ADHD treatments and decided that it was something that I wanted to pursue. And I'm so glad that I did.
Well, I think it's cool to have that conversation, kind of like talk about that stuff, simply because like there's so many trainers in the industry that have ADHD. Like I've probably interviewed maybe 3 or 4 trainers with ADHD, and like several of my friends in the industry have it, and like it doesn't negatively impact them. Like in many cases, like it makes them better at relating to people, or it makes them better at cueing exercises in great detail. And
Yeah, no,
some of
that's
them will
a
use like medication, some of them won't. But yeah, like what were you saying?
I think you're totally right. There's so many strengths that come with it. And I think I heard this fact where entrepreneurs are 300% more likely to have ADHD. And also, like, we're often drawn to exercise, especially if you display like the hyperactivity component. And it's really good for ADHD as well to exercise and move your body. But it also, it helps you just kind of think differently than other people. So that can help you with cueing exercises, or for me, I think it's like kind of seeing the big picture of what my client needs. And when I'm in a conversation with her, just thinking a little bit differently and getting her to kind of question her thought processes. We also tend to be like very passionate, very creative, very enthusiastic, have lots of energy. So it's 100%, like, I would not change it, which is why the diagnosis has been so empowering for me, because I'm like, oh, this is actually a superpower. I just need to kind of mitigate the weaknesses.
Yeah, well, it makes sense, and it's cool that we can frame it with so many things that make each person different. Like just like talking about it as like a superpower kind of thing, because in a lot of cases, like trainers are weird. Like people in the fitness industry are weird in a good way, like in a
Yeah.
way that sets us apart, that makes our clients want to work with us because they see them in us, and kind of owning it can be a differentiating factor. It can be the thing that helps you succeed. It can be the thing that helps you stay healthy and like have like a fulfilling lifestyle in the career, or just in general. Like anybody could be in any industry listening to this podcast and finding out about themselves and how they operate, and how to operate within their own like wheelhouse to the greatest degree is like a big thing for life. Like just imagine like if somebody was working in a busy office and then all of a sudden they realized that like there was an aid that could help them in their day to day, that could improve their just general well-being. Maybe not even like as a performance thing, but just as a how they reflect on themselves, or how they interact with their colleagues, or how much they worry about things not worth worrying about, or how, yeah, like how they handle stresses and stuff.
Yeah, 100%. And that's something I find with my fitness clients as well. Like, it starts out with working on their problems and their struggles with nutrition and with fitness, but those same concepts can be applied to any area of their life. And that's what it tends to happen, is like once they work on not sweating the details, and like focusing on consistency over perfection, and being more self-aware of their thoughts and how they're making them feel and how they're motivating them. And it's like, once you have that, then it's like, oh, I'm noticing the same thing in another area of my life. So that's kind of how I see fitness too, is it's like a gateway to self-improvement.
Yeah.
Like, once you're like, oh my God, like I can do it. I can like change my body. Like I'm feeling healthier. And I find like once they do that, then they're more open to like, oh, this meditation thing, or this journaling thing, or just like being more open to like working on themselves, feeling more motivated overall. Like it's a gateway. Just so
For
cool.
sure. Yeah. I mean, amidst all of that stuff, like let's go back a few months to like when you're first finding your housing arrangement in Bali. Like you're coming across a few obstacles with like leaking roofs and trying to like get the perfect place and stuff. Like what was it like to kind of not really know if the place that you're going to be at was going to work out or not, and that you might have to like figure out a new solution? Like what was that period of time like for you?
See, everyone tells me about or mentions the leaking roof thing. That wasn't actually a leaking roof. It was just an open concept house, and it was raining so hard that the rain was like spilling over the side and down the house, if that makes sense.
Oh, Yeah, it kind of makes sense. It's just like at the end of the day, there's water where water shouldn't be, and it was a
Yeah,
pain in the butt. So like I
yeah,
couldn't even imagine. The thing is, it's funny because in Edmonton, like you just get used to everything. It's the same. In the winter, it's cold, and then it's you get your 5 winters, and it's just like it's so predictable. And so you kind of get tossed into a new environment where suddenly you're not worried so much about snow. You're worried about like bugs and lizards and like
yeah.
water accumulation, etc. What was the shift like for you in like navigating new issues, or were you able to just kind of like reframe it and just like water off a rock kind of thing?
I mean, see, I used to be so scared of bugs and like spiders back in Canada, but I think Australia kind of primed me with that. I think if you're afraid of anything, like the best way to get through it is just exposure. Eventually, I was like it is what it is. If I die, I die. You gotta be careful with like the deadly ones, but I think just being around them so much, like I 100% used to be so afraid of spiders, and I would like freak out, and I was a little baby about it. But just being around them so much, I'm like, it's really not that bad. And I think that'll happen with any fear that you have. Humans are resilient, and that's something I've learned over the past couple months is like, you will get through it. And I think maybe I've just like had that experience with all like the new experiences and new challenges that I've had with moving to a different country, really having to like sort out all the details of how do I live, how do I work, and then living in the van, and then moving countries, and all of this in the middle of a pandemic. It's just really showed me that like whatever comes up, I will figure it out. And like I'm resilient, and I am capable, and there's no point in stressing about something that hasn't happened yet. So you'll deal with it once it comes up. The living situation, like where I kept moving from one place to the next, that was a little bit of a ADHD / my fault thing. I basically forgot to tell them that I wanted to extend, and then they told me 3 days before I had to leave that I had to leave. So that's, yeah, one of the ways that, like I said, like ADHD has like, when it presents itself in like forgetfulness and just struggles with like organizing your life and deadlines and things like that, like that's been, I guess, another thing that really like showed me or made me very aware that that's a strong deficit of mine, was things like that. And then like I overstayed my visa. So I was supposed to renew my visa after 2 months, and after 2 months and 10 days, I was like, when am I supposed to renew my visa again? And missed the fact that it was $100 a day for every day that you overextend it. So that was another more expensive lesson that I learned. But yeah.
Well, how many days did you overextend it? Oh,
Yeah.
that's brutal.
Yeah. Not going to make that mistake again, though.
Well, I mean, everybody kind of needs to go through that stuff. I look at the last year as being like a condensing of everything that a person would learn from. Like, we were gonna have these things happen to us one way or another, but we just got to, some of us experienced like 7 of them within a 12-month time frame. And in another lifetime, they may have experienced those 7 things over the course of like 5 to 10 years instead of like 2 years. And
Which type of things?
well, it's just like business, like people having to pivot in their business, people having to learn new things, having to get used to being around just their own company or being around different people. And it could be like weather phenomena, it could be plans not going according to plan. Like so many people had like things that they wanted to do, things on their bucket list, things, marriages,
Yeah.
engagements, big reunions, having to experience loss, like endless things that kind of shape people and like how they show up in the world. So it's just cool in a sense that just think of who you are or who anybody is walking away from all those like experiences that shape them, and just how they can like show up bigger in their next opportunity. Like, despite the fact that you probably have had to spend thousands of dollars in so many different scenarios where had it gone perfectly, you would have that money in the bank. Now you have those lessons that other people don't have yet. And I look at it the same way with like, being in Canada, where like the pandemic has really like pressured some people with the lockdowns. There's been like greater restrictions, stuff like that. But like, if not for these things, there's a lot of personal development that wouldn't have occurred. There's a lot of like business refinement that wouldn't have occurred. Like, before we started the show, we were kind of talking about different things that I've done with the podcast, and like I probably would have just been super complacent if not for like kind of having been stuck in my house for a while. But with all of that ramble out of the way, with regards to your own like business and career development, like it looked like you were kind of doing some new group stuff, or like partaking in some stuff to kind of develop yourself. Like, what has the last year been like in terms of that for you?
In terms of business and career development?
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been playing around with some different things with my group programs, and like last quarter, I tried kind of a different length of a program, and I've actually kind of come full circle to doing something I started out doing similarly. So if you're watching this, then you'll get an early announcement. I'm going to announce it soon, but I'm going back to like my 6-month program, because I just found that works the best. And it's really kind of, if I'm going to have one like flagship offer, that's what I really want to focus on, because my business and my coaching is all about helping people really, it's like mind, body, soul. It's holistic. And really about like helping people find a long-term lifestyle. Like, I don't want to send people off like not having the tools that they need. I feel like even ethically for me to like the kind of coach that I want to be is I really want to like make sure that someone is set up physically and mentally, because sometimes with like 12 weeks, they might, they'll learn some macros and they'll lose some weight, but they don't really know how to maintain it on their own. And then they might be like, oh, I'm going to keep, I'll just do what my coach told me to do and I'll keep seeing progress, and they don't see it. So really taking the time to like empower people and set them up for longer term is what I want to focus on. And then aside from that, I'm always just trying to learn more. So I haven't done any like formal courses or education since, but it's just part of my personality. Like, I'm so curious. I'm always wanting to learn. So, and especially when it comes to like psychology, that's a big interest of mine. And even with like learning more about ADHD, I've learned that with the struggles with like motivation and all or nothing thinking, those are all like just exacerbated with ADHD. So going down this rabbit hole of learning about that has given me a lot of tools to continue to help my clients. Like, it's kind of like those are things that I already helped them with previously, because it's something that a lot of people struggle with to a certain extent, but that's also like my niche client is someone who struggles with like all or nothing thinking, and kind of like yo-yo dieting. But learning more about how like an ADHD brain works and learning about psychology has helped me kind of refine my tools, or even just be able to explain them in a better way so that it lands better with people. That's something, but that's like kind of part of my personality. Like, when I did like a strengths finder test, my number one was input, so ability to like consume information. And I think it's also an ADHD thing because we like to be mentally stimulated. So that's something that I use to my advantage. And I think it's part of the reason why I'm such a good coach is because I'm like so genuinely curious and passionate about this stuff. And that causes me to have all this information in my brain that I can then apply to my programs and with my clients.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. And it's kind of cool, the whole like full circle moment, because I think a lot of people have those like those revelations of like, okay, like a new group of people or a new phase of life or just something new has come up that's kind of taught us to kind of just try something simple rather than reinventing the wheel. Like so often, people are like looking for the answers, like in some far off land, when all it is like asking better questions or just trying something familiar just in a whole new way.
Yeah.
With that being
I think
said, oh, sorry, go ahead.
one more thing that's really helped me is to stop comparing myself to other coaches and to other methodologies, because then that I just get really confused, and spend more time thinking about what are my experiences, how can I help people, what's like my message that I want to put out there, and just be really clear about that and own that, because that's how you're going to attract people. Like, you're not going to attract clients to you if you're like not sure and not confident in yourself and are kind of flip-flopping your ideas. So of course it's good to change your mind, but you really just have to like remember that your unique abilities and perspective and how you can help your clients, that is your superpower, and you should not try to be like anyone else, because then you're dulling, the gifts that you have to bring to the world and to your clients.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, like, it's just when somebody's learning something new and they're not exactly certain of what the right approach is, it's better to make mistakes and find your own path than it is to do like a watered down version of somebody else. Because,
Yeah.
like, you're never going to like connect with people in the same way that you would if you had made the attempt based on what you felt was right. Like, people making their choices based on their value systems, based on their experiences, and like what they think would work in the moment is much more valuable than just trying to like carbon copy someone that they admire or something just because they're just not sure if they would get it 100%, so they just want to copy what somebody else did. Because like
Yeah,
half the time,
that's a
like the new people like come up with like these ideas that stand out, that are a cut above just because it's a new idea, it's a new application, it's something that nobody else has tried before. What
yeah.
were you saying?
I was saying it's something that we have to be careful with in today's information age. Is like we can't lose that ability to think for ourselves and think critically, and I think this goes in any field. But like, don't just take it's okay to have mentors and people that you respect, but don't just take what someone says and use it for yourself. Like, that is again like stripping you of your superpower, which is the way that you think individually, and just practicing like really like thinking critically and independently, because that's how, like you said, you're going to bring something new and creative and be truly like innovative, and just being like, yeah, really bringing your individual gifts to your work.
Definitely. So when you're looking on your calendar and you put yourself in the future by a year, do you know what that looks like for you? Like, do you have like something mapped out for yourself, or big, hairy, audacious goals, or anything that you realistically feel like you need to accomplish within the next 12 months?
Um, I've actually I've gotten back into like bodybuilding, because I just kind of as like a personal goal. And speaking of coming back full circle, I'm realizing that like, okay, this is something that I can take all this personal growth that I've had over the last few years since I gave it up. And that's kind of how I started in the fitness industry, is through bikini competitions, through bodybuilding. That's what really made me fall in love with it. And just kind of had this hunch. I feel like I never quite reached my full potential with that. And I'm really excited to take like the personal growth that I've had and see what I can accomplish in this area of my life. And I feel like I'm in such a good place mindset wise. And it's just something that I want, like a personal goal that I want to accomplish. So, yeah, doing like bikini competitions again, and I'd like to get my pro card. That's kind of one goal that I have. And growing my business, I want to hire a team and just impact more women. So yeah, that's what I see myself doing in the next year.
And then what about location? Do you feel like you're going to go to a new setting? Are you going to stay in Bali? Like, what do you foresee for yourself in that capacity?
I think I'll be in Bali for a while, just because it's such a good setup for me at the moment, and just with everything that's going on in the world. And I've also realized that, like, yeah, traveling is cool, but it's not what I want to focus my life around. My taking care of myself and my mental health and my business are what are most important to me. So I don't know if I'll be here in a year. I'm really kind of playing that one by ear when it comes to just like where I want to live individually. This is cool, but I think it really depends. Like if I meet someone, or I'm just really staying open to any opportunities with that, because I can do my business from anywhere, and I can, work out anywhere, and the things that are really important to me I can do that like anywhere.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes sense, and it's just kind of cool to
But
reflect on that. Oh, go ahead.
I will say, like, when it comes to like where I want to live eventually, like warm weather, sunshine is so important to me. So that's always like factoring in when I think about where I see myself living, just because it makes such a big impact on my mood. My parents also said they will retire wherever I live. So hopefully I'll have my family there too. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a game changer. Like, it's so many people's moods. It's like really bad, or like really they can either struggle or they can thrive based on like the place that they're living. And so it's just kind of cool that you've been able to sort of see that where you live makes such a big difference in such a positive way.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
So right now, like, the screen's kind of frozen. I don't know if your screen's frozen, but I've got you a bit frozen on my screen, but I'm going to assume that you can still hear me. Is everything still working on your end?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, everything's fine.
Oh, now we're good. Now we're good. So, something that I ask all of my guests as of late is I've been getting them to dish out some challenges for the audience. So it's just something simple, but like something that's like unique to you, that's been on your mind, that you want a bunch of people that listen to a podcast to do, that you think would enrich their life. And so essentially what you're going to do is you're going to be like, your challenge for the day is, and then just give it to them.
Okay, I got it. Your challenge for the day is every time you walk past a mirror, you have to say something nice to yourself. Or give yourself like words of encouragement.
I like that.
Because I think that, like, we don't do that enough for ourselves. And like, it's the power that can have. Because like, it's like if you had a person following you all day who's just like saying mean things to you, it's like that's going to get to you eventually. And like just the power that your thoughts have, and it just being a little intentional with that can really just like change your mindset and your mood and like your relationship with yourself so much. So just something simple with that, like, okay, you see yourself in a mirror, like talk to yourself, like be your own hype woman or hype man. And just like see the difference that makes in how you feel.
That's perfect. That's a great challenge. So with that being said, that essentially wraps up our episode. I'd like to thank you so much for coming back on the show and catching up and bringing everybody up to speed. Hopefully people go back and listen to the old episode from about April 30th or so of last year to kind of get that whole like full circle moment.
What number it is?
Roughly, I would say probably like 130 or something like that. And this is episode 169. So it's like, it's 30 episodes ago, maybe 60 episodes ago. Maybe it's the early 100s. It's hard to know because it's just like all the numbers just kind of blend. And also it's like a Jedi mind trick, because like when I don't say the exact episode, then they have to like look at all the other episodes where it's other people that they might like recognize. And,
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's been great, and thank you so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.